Hi, and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are going to make protein bread. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you have been seeing over the past month or so bread that I have been making and trying to get it to be the perfect balance of everything that I want, and I think I am as close as I'm going to get. So I started out in the beginning of December stumbling upon Maria Emmerich's chewy protein sparing bread, and I started making that, and I liked it. It was good. It at least gave us something to use for those days when we needed sandwiches or something quick to carry on the go, because it was a go day. We lived 30 minutes from the big town, and so and I was able to make like French toast casseroles because I have kids. I can go without bread forever. It doesn't bother me. I'll slap some meat and cheese together and I'm good. But kids, they want to have something a little more normal. But due to some of them having various metabolic conditions and just wanting to teach them how to be healthy and eat healthy and get adjusted to keeping their carbohydrates low, my husband and I want to teach them how to feel good with the food that they're eating. And our youngest daughter has to be absolutely gluten-free. So, last summer and stuff, I was spending money on gluten-free bread. It wasn't keto, it wasn't carnivore, it wasn't anything like that. But, I mean, you're paying $5 to $6 for a loaf, and it wasn't that good. It was just a transport to get the food that's in the sandwich into her. So she didn't like it at first, but she got accustomed to it. And then as we started transitioning more and more to more of a animal-based, really like no vegetables, even really cutting out a lot of the nuts and nut flours and things like that, and going on to more of the curve of the proper human diet, which for us is almost carnivore. She decided that she wanted to do proper human diet too, and she told me not to buy any more bread, so I didn't buy any more bread. But then she was missing the ease of taking things with us on our days that we would have to run to town. So anyway, I do have a couple of bread recipes on my blog, and so if you go to sharislowcarbkitchen.com, you will see the recipes there. Some of them use almond flour and coconut flour, things like psyllium husk, and they're fine. They're good. They all serve their purpose for different things, but they can be not everyone's cup of tea, especially if they're switching over and they're missing their traditional bread, or you just like that Wonder Bread type of thing. And I grew up on cheap white bread, and I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I miss that texture. It reminds me of my grandma, and sitting there and having butter and bread. And so anyway, I stumbled onto Maria Emmerich's protein sparing bread, her chewy bread. She's got a few different recipes, and if you just Google Maria Emmerich protein sparing bread, it'll take you to her website, and you'll see, I think she's got like 4 different base recipes, and then she's got other recipes where she tweaks those base recipes into like cinnamon swirl bread and things like that. But I was just looking for a bread. So I started with the protein, with the chewy bread, and it was good, and my kids actually liked it. It lacked flavor, and so it really was just a transport, but it had a decent texture. But it still seemed a little bit dry almost. I don't know how to explain it. But one of my issues with that is it called for 12 egg whites. Now, I'm making this at the end of January 2023. So, you know that a dozen eggs is anywhere from $4 to $10, depending on the size and, if you're getting organic or, what have you. Even at Aldi's, you're going to pay over $4 a dozen. And then add in the other ingredients, one of which is egg white powder, and you're driving the cost of the loaf up to $6, $7, $8, $9. So that is not budget friendly. Now, if you're just a single person and you've got, you're not on a fixed income, you have a job, you've got plenty of money, that might be fine for you. For us, we have a large family. And yes, while I have my own hens, I only have 8 hens, and which means we get 6 to 8 eggs a day, which clearly is not enough to make a loaf of bread a day. And I didn't want to use all my egg whites on bread, because then I'd still have to go out and buy eggs for the family. So I decided to set out on a journey to make this a budget-friendly recipe, to make it have great texture, good flavor, not a lot of funky ingredients, because I had started looking into egg white bread, and I have made the cloud bread before, which is just like egg white, cream cheese, and cream of tartar. I don't care for the texture of that, not as like a bread, and I could never get it to not fall apart after it was cooked. So that was no bueno. So I was trying to figure out how to incorporate all these different aspects from different recipes that I had seen. Some used yeast, some didn't use yeast, some used butter powder, and some had water, some were all just egg white powder. And so over the past month, I have done a lot of trial and error. I have not had any epic unedible failures. We have eaten everything that I have tried. Some have been a little more spongy or like memory foam texture than the others. And I have tried some with liquid egg whites, because what I found was, I thought, oh, I found liquid egg whites. So I thought, great, maybe I'll try making Maria's bread with the liquid egg whites, and my own tweaks. That worked kind of. It was very dense. It still did really good. I even tried that and increasing a little bit of the egg white powder and adding some water, and it rose really good. And that might have worked had I increased the cooking time a little bit. So what I stumbled on is actually doing a mixture of egg whites from eggs and the liquid cartoned egg whites, and then adding in some egg yolk at the very end, and increasing the cream of tartar. That has worked really well. So this is the bread, and you can see it's got the beautiful bubbles in it, like what you would see in a white bread. Now this one is kind of funky, looks like a little bit of Mickey Mouse ears. One of the issues with this kind of bread, it's temperamental in the way that it rises and then settles. I was playing around with a scoring technique, and I scored a little bit too deep, and so it rose with this funky little thing, but it's perfectly edible. It's really good. You're going to see, if you choose to make this, that every loaf is going to look a little bit different, but the texture and the taste should be relatively the same. So you can see, like, it pinches just like regular bread. And my oldest actually said that this tastes so much like bread that she doesn't even like the crust, because when she was little she didn't like bread crust at all. So it's just really good. It rips just like white bread. If you've ever taken white bread apart and like mushed it up, my mom used to do this when I was little. She'd make bread balls. This does just the same. So if you need like bread crumbs or anything like that, you could probably let this dry out and make that. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to be angling the camera kind of down, so you're not going to see much of me, but that's okay. You're here to see the ingredients. One other thing is all the recipes that I found called for using teaspoons, tablespoons, cups, and what I was finding is I wasn't getting a consistent result. And then I started thinking back to when I used to make artisan bread. And when I used to make artisan bread, I used a kitchen scale and I weighed everything. I didn't use measuring spoons and things like that, because different ingredients or different brands can be larger grain. So therefore, like with salt, I have a fine sea salt, a fine Redmond salt, so it's really, really fine. And I've got a coarser. Okay. Well, the problem is, if it calls for half a teaspoon of what kind of salt? If you have coarser and the recipe maker said half a teaspoon and they were using fine salt, then you're actually going to have less salt. And the same with like the allulose, which this uses. With the allulose, mine is a little bit finer powder because I order it in bulk, and from the candy place that I get it from, it's already it's not as granular as say Wholesome Yum allulose. So again, those measurements would be off, and I really wanted a consistent measurement. So I'm even weighing the egg whites, and here's why. All the recipes that I were seeing, even Maria and Marik's, was 12 egg whites. 12 large egg whites, 12 jumbo egg whites, 12 medium egg whites. And even among those, eggs are different sizes. So if you have backyard hens, you'll see they don't all lay the same size eggs. These are from two different hens, same age, but the eggs are different. So they're going to weigh a different amount. So again, I really wanted to get consistent results. So I cracked a bunch of eggs and separated them from the egg yolks, and I weighed each egg white, and then I did an average. So what I found was, and I did this from 6-7 different hens, different breeds, so all different, eggs. So what I found was the average egg size that I was having was about 40 grams of egg whites. And so I did that, and then I figured out how much of those of actual egg whites I needed, and then how much to use for the cartoned egg whites. And so that worked out really nice. I have already separated my egg whites, and so they are here. They are measured. It's 200 grams of egg whites. And the reason that I I just didn't want to waste the time on camera, and I have found that leaving the actual egg whites from the eggs get to room temperature helps them to whip up better. Couple tips is it is best to crack and separate your egg whites separately. So, and I got this cute little penguin guy to separate. You can use the eggshells and whatever. But the two reasons that you want to do that, one is if you break a yolk and any of it gets in the white, it will not whip up. So by doing one at a time and then putting it into the big container as you have it on the scale, it's going to be better, because that way if you have an oops, you can just put that egg with the broken yolk in a separate container, clean out the bowl so there's no egg yolk, and then start again. If you were to just keep breaking, separating your yolks into your container, that's, well, if you end up getting a yolk in there, then the whole thing's got to be tossed out. So that's just what I like to do. So this recipe calls for 5 egg whites from eggs, 3 egg yolks. So you're going to reserve 3 of those egg yolks, the other 2 put in the fridge for either another batch or to make into something else. 200 grams of liquid egg from a carton. Now you can, if you've got 50 chickens and you get 20 eggs a day or whatever, by all means, use all the egg whites, skip the cartons, but I would still measure them so that you're getting 400 grams of egg white. And sometimes I'll be baking or something, recipes that just call for egg yolks, so I retain all of my egg whites and I just leave them in the refrigerator. So that's the other nice thing about measuring, is I can just be like, oh, I've got a big bowl of egg whites in the refrigerator. I can measure out the 200 grams and it's perfectly fine. I need to grab one thing. Okay, so if, totally forgot my train of thought now. Yeah, so that way you can just measure it and be good. Or maybe your eggs are smaller, like mine today. I actually had to use about 5.5 egg whites to get the 200 grams. So I put the other half an egg white in there. If you're using all egg whites, it is gonna it's gonna whip up even higher. So you know your bread is gonna be a little bit bigger. So just know that. And then for the measurements for the egg whites and the liquid cartoned egg whites, if it's a little over the amount that I will have in the recipe, that's okay, but you don't want it to be under the amount. All right, and with that, so I'm just going to go through everything that you'll need. So you need egg whites, 5 egg whites from actual eggs. You need 200 grams of cartoned egg whites, 3 egg yolks. Stop. I don't know what that timer was. Your salt of choice. So I like to use Redmond real salt. Because we're going to be weighing, it doesn't matter the grain. In the recipe and as we're going along, I will tell you the approximate measuring amounts in case you don't have a scale, and then you can do that. You're going to need some gelatin powder. I prefer the beef gelatin powder. And anytime that you're buying something like this, you just always want to make sure that you look at the ingredients and that they're pure and they don't have any hidden fillers, fibers, or starches or sugars. This is just beef gelatin. So it's protein, but there's absolutely no carbohydrates whatsoever. I will link this. I have not found it locally, so I order on Amazon. Cartoned egg whites, which you will find at your grocery store. The cartoned egg whites really bring the price of the loaf down, because like I got this at Aldi's, it was like $3.50, and I'll get about at least 4 loaves of bread out of this. You will need allulose. I buy mine in bulk online from Lang's Chocolate, but you can get it wherever. Again, just look at the back, make sure it's pure allulose, and you know that there's no dextrose or maltodextrin or anything like that added. If there's some erythritol, I use erythritol, just not in my bread. I really prefer just the pure allulose. The reason that we use this is allulose melts and browns, so that's how you get the brown crust on the bread. And if you are like, I don't want to use any sweeteners, this does not make it sweet. You will not even taste it. It's just for the browning effect. You can leave it out, and but your bread just may not brown as nicely. So you'll need that. You will need egg white powder, and I get this on Amazon as well. The Now Sports is the most economical that I have found. There's a couple different sellers on Amazon. So again, you just want to make sure what is in this. This is complete pure egg white powder. There's nothing added. And then you will need cream of tartar. So, all right. So this is my kitchen scale. My daughter got this for me for Christmas because my other one had gone kaput. Okay. So essentially, when I put it on here, so these are the room temp egg whites. I zero out the scale. And now I'm going to add 200 grams of the cartoned egg whites. All right, so I'm a little bit over, but again, like I said, it's okay to be a little bit over. You don't want to be under. So I'm going to just set that aside. Hey, Zoe, could you hand me a spoon? What? Could you hand me a spoon? Yeah. Thank you. All right. Zero that out. Okay, so I just put all of my dry ingredients in here, and each time I have it measured out, then I just zero my scale out for the next ingredient. So 65 grams, or roughly 5 tablespoons of allulose. Again, you can see how mine is really fine like a powder. There are others that are more granulated, and so that would affect the measuring, which is why I found that the weighing just keeps everything really consistent. All right, so that's the allulose. Zero that out. Gelatin, the beef gelatin is going to be 30 grams, or roughly 3 tablespoons. Now, obviously, if you're someone that's sensitive to egg whites, this is not going to be the bread for you. But like I said, I have other recipes on my website, so you can always go and check one of those out. Okay, so I'll zero that out again. Salt is 5 grams, or roughly 1 teaspoon. So there we go. And then cream of tartar is 8 grams, or roughly 1.5 teaspoons. That's the steak seasoning.
Is it the same as this?
Yeah, I think so. Just use the one that's open. So the air fryer is going to be going for a little bit. That's okay, because we're going to be whipping egg whites, so it's going to be a little noisy in here anyway. Now the increased amount of cream of tartar is important because it really does help get those egg whites whipped, because we're not using complete egg whites from eggs, and the egg whites that are in the carton are pasteurized, so they really don't whip up quite as well. So that's that. That is all my dry ingredients, all measured out, and I just kind of mix it all together. Because there's gelatin in here, I do chill my mixing bowl just so that I don't risk having the gelatin start activating before the egg whites are whipping up. If that makes a difference or not, I don't know. I had just seen that online as a tip, and I was like, that makes sense. So I started to do that. All right. So we are going to put the egg whites in our bowl. Egg white goo there. All right. We're going to put our dry ingredients in. And then I just kind of take my whisk and just kind of incorporate it a little bit. Again, it's not super necessary, but I just like to do that. It makes me feel better.
Mom, do you know where the pickles went?
I think you have to open a new okay, so let's move this camera a little closer. Now while this is whipping, and I will be fast forwarding, or I will speed this up, I will measure out the egg white powder, and it is 58 grams, so I'm just going to have that measured out so that it's ready to go once the egg whites are whipped. We're going to whip these for roughly 5 minutes or so until they're going to rise and get really stiff. Get this so you can kind of see. All right. So you're going to I start out at a lower speed, and then I get it all the way up as high as possible. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can do this with, pardon me, I had a frog in my throat. You can do this with a hand mixer with the 2 beaters, and you're just going to keep mixing and mixing and mixing in the bowl until you get what looks like here. So you don't have to have a stand mixer to do this. Okay, so this is whipped up. And you see it's nice and stiff. I just kind of get some of the egg whites down because when you add the egg white powder, it's going to really ball it up and get stuck even more in here. So you've got a couple of options. You can add the egg white powder with the stand mixer, or you can add it and mix it by hand. You're not going to mix it a lot with the stand mixer. You're going to really like 10-20 seconds on speed 2, and because the longer that you mix it, the more risk you run of getting styrofoam texture. So this is the 58 grams of egg white powder. And it is going to get, I have not found a way to not have it end up being dusty. So just going to kind of incorporate. And I take it down to 1, and I'm going to add the egg yolks so that they gently fold in. And again, you're going to do this just briefly. Okay. So this kind of gets a little bit messy. It's not bad. And just put the camera right back over here.
I saw that you made yesterday.
Yes, it is. All right. So you're just going to get and while I'm doing this, my oven was supposed to have been preheating to 325, but I forgot to start it. So thankfully it preheats fairly fast. So you just get as much of the egg white mixture that you can out of the whisk. Some whisks, only have a few of the cross things. Mine has more, so it makes it a little bit more of a challenge. If you're using a hand mixer with just the beater, then you're just gonna clean it just like you would cookie dough. Not that you should be eating cookie dough, but or traditional cookie dough, but you know what I mean. So you are never gonna get it completely clean. You're just gonna get what you can. Now again, you don't necessarily have to mix. You could have just taken this out cleaned off, then added the egg white powder and incorporated it, and that would have been fine. Whatever your preference is. And I might play with that too. But I knew this way worked, and since I wanted to get this video done because I had people asking me, I didn't want to do like another thing. So that is as clean. My hands are clean, by the way. All right, this is as good as that's gonna get. Set that right there. Okay. So what you're gonna do is you are just going to give this a few stirs just to make sure that everything is incorporated. You want the yolks to be fully incorporated, so you're just gently gonna kind of fold this because you want to keep as much of the air as you can in. And you just want to make sure that that egg white powder is incorporated. Alright, so that looks pretty well mixed, and it's still holding the air, so we're good there. Now, for your bread pan, you can spray with like an avocado oil spray or something. I just prefer to line my pan with parchment paper. I just find it easier, and I'm not dealing with spray and having the spray soak down or soak into the bread. And you're just gonna plop it in here. Now I know it does look, if you've ever made the cloud bread, it looks like it, but it definitely does not bake like it, and it does not taste like it. It does not fall apart. So you kind of just get this down into the corners.
Yeah?
All right. Now, if you're going to make multiple loaves, you'll need to wash your, or rinse or whatever you're mixing things in between. Just make sure that they're completely dry, because if you get extra, if there's water in there, it might not whip up as good as you want. I've added water to the egg whites. It does whip up, but it really can affect the baking. And you're just going to kind of smooth this out and shape it. had people say this looks like angel food cake. I've never made angel food cake, so I really don't know. It can be a little bit of a pain. You just have to be okay with the fact that you're not going to get all the batter. Now you can, I have not, but I will be, bake this in small French loaf pans, you know, to split it up. You can do this free form, basically like make balls on a lined cookie sheet for some hamburger type buns. You could make them longer for hot dog type buns. I do plan to play around with that. You could add in some cinnamon and a little more sweetener to if you're trying to do more like a dessert type bread. This is really a good base bread. So now one technique that I picked up and it's been working really well is to score just right along the top, because if you don't, and you don't have to by any means, it's going to raise, and what I found is a lot of times the air wants to escape because this is really a very light, I mean it's heavy but it's light. So it will kind of raise like this, so you'll have one side that's up and then lower. It tastes fine, it's just not as pretty. So I just you can do a butter knife, whatever. You don't want to go way down because then you end up with the Mickey Mouse bread like I showed you in the beginning, because I didn't go way down, I went down about that much. Just really lightly score right across the center, following that curve. And I'll go back through the same score that I did. Okay. Now I'm going to put this in the oven and bake it for between 37 to 40 minutes, and then I'll check it. Once it's baked, just turn the timer or turn the oven off. It needs to stay in the oven for another 15 to 20 minutes to finish baking on the inside, and so that it doesn't fall. It is going to fall a little bit, but you don't want it to fall as much. And then you're going to let it cool completely before cutting it. So I will be back when this is done being baked. Okay, so we are back for a few minutes. The timer went off, and I shut the oven off and I left it cool for the 15 minutes, and when I went to check on it, it still felt a little too spongy on the inside, so I did cook it. I ended up turning the oven back on, cooking it for a little longer. So the top is going to be a little more brown, but than what it normally would be. And so I had cooked it for 40 minutes. I really should have left it in there for about 45 minutes, and I think it would have been perfect. So it is going to be a little bit darker, but let's peek at it. It still needs to cool off a little bit more before I pull it out of the oven. Now the oven's been off for another 15 minutes. So I just want to bring you over and we shall peek at it. So doesn't that just look lovely? Now you can see where the scoring was. So at least it's just in the middle on the top that it's split versus this side being all the way lifted. It's nice, and when you can like push on it and it kind of springs back, then you know it's done. So it's cool enough that I'm gonna bring it out and set it on the stove so that it can cool even more. And then as soon as it's room temp, I will come back on camera, pull it out, and then we will cut it together. Actually, what will end up happening is once it's a little bit cooler, then I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to put it on a wire cooling rack and let it sit. That's not something that really we need to video. And then once it's completely cool, I'll come back on camera and we'll cut it and check it together. So I'll be back soon. Okay, so we are back, and here's our loaf of bread. So it sunk a little bit on the inside, and again, that's just because it didn't cook as good as I wanted it to, so then I had to put the oven temp back up. Normally it doesn't look like this, but it's still just fine, totally edible. So let's cut into it. All right. Cut the heel part off first. Oops. Okay. So the texture is great. Feels wonderful. You can actually, if you've ever like pressed, if you've ever pressed on white bread, and you know you can kind of hear it, but it's got the good bubbles in it, and so the texture is spot on. Like I said, this bread kind of has a mind of its own, so the texture and taste will always be the same, pretty close. The depending on, you know, how your oven is, if it cooks well enough. I should have had it in there for 45 minutes instead of the 40 minutes, and then it would have been fine. But see, it rips just like bread. Spot on. So results might vary depending on your ingredients. As long as they're clean, it's going to be, you know, right around there. It shouldn't vary too much, but depending on, you know, the temperature of the house and humidity and things like that, all of those things can affect the bread. If you over whip the yolks, you know, overfold the yolks in, that can cause it to fall a little, but it's still going to be delicious, and you're still going to be able to make sandwiches. Or if you get a loaf that falls, that would be a good one to make French toast casserole with or something. But overall, I think I've nailed it. Even the presentation, this is probably like not the prettiest loaf that I've made, but it's still really good. So just a quick recap: when you're separating your yolk from your eggs, do that one at a time. Weigh your ingredients versus scooping if possible. If you don't have a stand mixer, a regular hand mixer with the 2 beaters will work. It just means more work for you because you have to stand there and hold it. Either spray your bread pan with an avocado type spray. Please don't use vegetable oil or canola oil or anything like that. Those are super, super bad for you. Or line with parchment paper like I did. You can't really over whip the eggs, and then you can either slowly whip in the egg white powder and then slowly fold the yolk in with the machine, or you can try to do it by hand. I think I'm going to try to do it by hand the next one that I make and see how I like that. Bake at 325 for 37 to 45 minutes depending on your oven accuracy. Check on it. It should be a nice deep golden brown to brown color, and it shouldn't feel gooey to the touch. Then shut the oven off, leave the door closed, let it set for at least 15 to 20 minutes. You could just leave it cool, you know, the whole time in there. Pull it out, make sure it's completely cool before attempting to cut. and enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I hope you enjoyed the recipe and find it budget friendly and tasty, which were the two things that I was really trying to nail. If you like this, please share this video. Also, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll be back with my next recipe creation whenever the inspiration hits. Thanks. I forgot to add, keep this in the fridge. You can slice it up and put it in a Ziploc or something. You can either keep it in the fridge for 4 to 6 days, somewhere in there, or you can actually freeze it for longer and just pull out what you want. I'm sure I forgot something else because I always do when I do these videos, but that will have to do. Thanks.